properties. There he goes. Okay.
Yay. Everything talking
All
to
right.
each other now.
My bad.
It's okay.
I don't know what happened. There we go. Okay. I don't know. All right. So we're talking about cooperation. Of all the Southern Baptist things that we've gone through, there's this contains both of them. Probably the most distinctive parts of the Southern Baptist. The first one being our local autonomy, which we've talked about. Every church is locally autonomous, but also our cooperation. Historically, well, Southern Baptists all through history have been cooperative. Now that's part necessity because of the way we're organized, but partly that's just in our DNA as Southern Baptists. So we'll read through this and then we'll discuss as we go, as we do always. And it says, Christ's people should, as occasion requires, organize such associations and conventions as may best secure cooperation for the great objects of the kingdom of God. Such organizations have no authority over one another or over the churches. They are voluntary and advisory bodies designed to elicit, combine, and direct the energies of our people in the most effective manner. Members of New Testament churches should cooperate with one another in carrying forward the missionary, educational, and benevolent ministries for the extension of Christ's kingdom. Christian unity in the New Testament sense is a spiritual harmony and voluntary cooperation for common ends by various groups of Christ's people. Cooperation is desirable between the various Christian denominations when the end to be attained itself is justified and when such cooperation involves no violation of the conscious or compromise of loyalty to Christ and His Word as revealed in the New Testament. Now you notice at first, the very beginning, it says, Christ's people should. Now that is an ought statement. This is what we ought to do. And if you click through these links down at the bottom, the references, the Bible reference that they use to justify this, you'll find Nehemiah, right? That was a group of people when they come to rebuild Israel after their exile, right? You have various groups of people cooperating to that effect, and it goes into details. Some people built, the metal workers built the iron. You had gold workers making the decoration. You had bricklayers laying the brick. All kinds of cooperation there. It'll go into, Acts, the history of the early church, how they were selling property to support the church. They were taking up donations for churches in need, sending out missionaries, Paul and, all those group of people to travel around and give the mission work. I mean, it's all through the history of Scripture. I don't see any counterpoint to any of this. In fact, the Scriptures themselves come from the fact that these Scriptures were written down and shared amongst the churches. The church at Philippi, the church at Colossae, the church at Laodicea, right? Those are all different churches in different regions, yet they're sharing, these scriptures being passed around. So in that way, it's a cooperation. So cooperation is all through the history of the New Testament. Now, what makes it different in a Southern Baptist sense is the local autonomy. Notice in this second sentence, such organizations have no authority over one another or over the churches. Now, that means that nobody can say, oh, you're going to do this or you're going to take it away. For example, like even this church here is a local cooperation, right? We're all cooperating to make this church work. We have various people throwing egg hunts, various people give money, we pay the pastor, we pay the power bill, right? We're all cooperating in that. But then, like we cooperate in other places. Let's see, for example, we give to the Western Baptist Association. So if you're familiar with Wayne Jenkins, he was our association minister for a long time. He's now retired, and we wish him well. But that's a big gaping hole to fill because he was there for like 15 or 20 years. He was there for a while. We help support him, and other churches in the association help support him. Now think about this. Let's say we had a problem, and Kenny gets up there and starts, preaching prosperity gospel or whatever. There's some real bad problem that we need taken care of. If we were another denomination, let's say we were Catholic, well, the Catholic Church has authority over its priest. So they could come down and remove that pastor. They can, and they have, and they will. Same thing with Presbyterians. Presbyterians are under the authority of the presbytery. And so if there's a problem with a Presbyterian minister, the presbytery can step in, remove that person, correct that person. Southern Baptists, we don't have that. So some people think of it as a hierarchy. Like you have the local church, then you have the local association, then you have the state association, and then you have the national association. That is an incorrect way of thinking of Southern Baptists. We do not report anywhere in there. There is no reporting structure. Western Baptists can say, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. But they can't stop you or this church from doing that. The church, being locally autonomous, is also locally responsible for its decisions. Now, pros and cons about that. It gives a lot of flexibility in all kinds of areas. But it also causes lots of problems. So if you've been keeping up with the Southern Baptists over the past few years, they've been dealing with a sexual abuse crisis. People in leadership positions in Southern Baptist churches have been engaged in sexually inappropriate activity. And there's been a huge discussion of, the Southern Baptist Convention's been covering it up. A lot like the Catholic sexual abuse scandal, a few years before that. The difference is Southern Baptist churches are locally autonomous. The Southern Baptist Convention cannot make any individual church report on any particular incident. They don't have authority. That's the point. We're not, in fact, in technical terms, we're not a denomination. It's called Southern Baptist Convention. We're a collection. We get together, but we don't report to each other. And so that causes a problem because when there is these distributed incidents, because there's, 40,000 churches or something crazy like that, right? If there's 10 of them that are bad or have bad things going on in them, it's hard for us to keep track because we don't report to one another. That's one of the downfalls of this organization. Whereas in a Catholic church, if they were to know that would be reported up the chain, and they'd be like, well, this pastor is out, and if he tries to go to another church, it'll be on file, right? They reference him looking up and say, no, that's not going to work. Whereas if it comes to our church, we're very informal. If you want to join as a member at this church, right? You come by what? Profession of faith or a movement of letter, right? That movement of letter has kind of been de-emphasized over history because that was really important back in the day. That movement of letter was your letter of recommendation, the kind of person that you are. Nowadays, we're just kind of like, yeah, we're moving a letter. Do you know, there used to actually be physical letters moving back and forth between churches. Yes, Mr. Davis is a great guy, so-and-so, we're sorry to lose him, right? But he moved. Nowadays, there's no letter. There's no letter at all. In fact, we've sent out letters to other churches. They don't respond because it doesn't work like that anymore. And so that is a real problem with these Southern Baptists. It's not a problem. There's pros and cons. And it's a con to the organizational structure. But we cooperate in such a way to where on things that, let's see here at the end, when the end to be attained is itself justified, and when such cooperation involves no violation of conscience or compromise to the loyalty of Christ and His Word as revealed, that statement right there is up to the local church to decide. How different, let's say, or how bad off does a church need to be for us to decide not to cooperate with them? Let's say, for example, and this is purely hypothetical, let's say we want to partner with Rehoboth and we want to run like a mission at the fair coming up, right? We want to partner together to run a booth. And then we find out that one of their ministers has been convicted of sexual assault. Do you continue with that partnership? Now, maybe you know that the lead pastor over there has dealt with this. This person's been dismissed, right? And, you know, they're no longer a problem and it's being handled by the authorities as appropriate. That's up for the local church to decide, right? Some churches may decide, no, we're going to cancel. We're going to cancel this cooperation until such time that we are fully vetted, right? Because it's your reputation tied together. Fully vetted that it's resolved. Or, you know, hey, you know, we know that's a bad thing that's happened. We obviously say, no, that was a bad thing. We're not agreeing with it, but it's been taken care of, and we'll continue on with this cooperation. Whichever way you go, the point is, it's up to the local church to decide what to cooperate, how to cooperate, and when to cooperate. Now, let's start with what we actually do. So, if you zone out during our business meetings, these things are actually important. This is our budget. If you didn't get a copy, see Daryl. I'm sure he'll be glad to point you to Kenny to get you a copy. This part right here, missions, you'll see these two lines: Southern Baptist Cooperative Program, Western Baptist Association. Typically, how this works is we send a portion of what's given to us into what we call the Southern Baptist Cooperative Program, or the cooperation, however you want to call it, the general fund of the Southern Baptist. And we also fund our local association, our Western Baptist Association. Now, how this works is we fund them, and then they in turn fund the programs that we ourselves cannot fund in general. For example, if you're, that's my kid.
Of course it is.
If we wanted to send a missionary to South Africa, let's say somebody in our congregation said, you know, the Lord has really led me to be a missions to South Africa for whatever reason. Do we have the resources to send them, to train them? They've got to learn a new language. They've got to learn new customs. We need to teach them some good theology before they, you know, go all crazy. Are we as a local church prepared to support all that? That's a big endeavor, right? You're talking, and then the logistics of such an endeavor. Or are we better off pooling our resources together and having maybe a well-established seminary train them, a well-established travel organization arrange travel, a well-established language institute to train them in their language? We can do all that through the Southern Baptist Cooperation. That's what they do. And then our Western Baptist Association, they're still looking for a fill-in for Wayne, but I can tell you, like, they do a ton of stuff too. You got a mailer toward the end of last year, they mailed everybody in the association mailing limits, inviting them to a Southern Baptist church. They do a lot of training. They brought in all the various VBS curriculums for this year and had people from Lifeway and stuff at the association. Is Lifeway going to be, you know, are we going to fly somebody from Lifeway into this church for a one-on-one conversation, pay for the hotel and all that? No. But the association, when we have 40 churches, yeah, we can arrange that, and we can ask them questions and all that stuff. What this is, it's allowing us to do things bigger than ourselves, than we can do. Yes, we are totally in charge of running our own church. We built this building. That's something within our means. We can run programs. But there are things outside of our means. Sending out missionaries. sending out, training our next generation of leaders, right? How do we have world-class theologians here to train? Sure, we can give them some theology, but is it, world-class? Is it great? Is it kind of weird to hear your echo? So all these things happen through the cooperation. And this is what we've budgeted to send out. Now, these numbers are percentages, and we've actually made, at this church, a conscious effort to reduce the amount that we send to the Southern Baptist Cooperative Program and increase the amount going to our local association. But that is, again, up to the local church. And in any way, again, they don't tell us what to do. They assist us. You can kind of think of it, they work for us. And so I know Wayne did a great job. He's helped me questions about stuff that I didn't normally do. We had to send out some mail for VBS. He's helped with graphic design. They can print out stuff. They have a huge printer up there that we couldn't afford, but because the church is, cooperative there. So that's the first step. It all starts at the local church. And for a long time, historically, the only thing you had to do to be called Southern Baptist was to to give money into the cooperative program. For the longest time, that was the only definition. Now we have that extra addition of loosely follow the Southern Baptist faith and message, whatever that means, right? Which we've talked about before, how loose is loose and all that stuff. There's another diagram I wanted to bring up that kind of shows the flow here. And I've got about 50,000 slides. It's this one right here. So if you ever wondered, okay, of that money, where does it flow? So our church gives, and it goes, let's ignore the bottom, this part here. It goes into the state cooperative program. So when our budget says Southern Cooperative Program, it means Georgia State Southern Baptist Cooperative Program. It flows into the state. So the state pools all its resources, and the state convention does a lot of things. Did you know that the Southern Baptists have an orphanage? Well, they call it children's home now. Orphanage is an old term, but they help raise children that are been in very bad situations, and it's up near Palmetto. The one I know of, at least. State of Georgia has disaster relief. If you've been in a disaster, like when the tornadoes came through Noonan, they have portable trucks that have showers and laundry, and they deliver supplies and all that fun stuff. So, the Georgia state level has some, and then from there, all the state conventions give into the national level Southern Baptist Cooperative Program, which half of that goes into International Mission Board, IMB. That's sending missionaries all across the world. Also, I should say here, this also supports in-state missionaries. So this goes into international missions, and half of it goes into other SBC entities. So you see North American Mission Board. This is our NAMB, sometime abbreviated. These are missionaries inside North America. We operate 6 seminaries. We're treating that next generation of leaders. And they're world-class seminaries. They're very, very highly rated. New Orleans Baptist Theological, Southwestern Theological, the Southern Baptist Seminary. I think it's 6. I don't think Dallas, maybe it is. It could be sponsored by a state, because the state also sponsors a couple schools, Shorter, Bruton, Parker. There's another one, Truett McConnell. So, and then they also have, the Executive Committee and the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. What is that? Well, that's the big wigs dealing with the politicians in Washington, right? To getting Southern Baptist Southern Baptist policies in front of the political. So We were talking about abortion with some people early this morning, right? That commission is the ones interacting with politicians trying to influence abortion policies throughout the state. They're also writing reports and, all that fun stuff. But we need somebody like that, and we have a commission for that. Here lately, they've also been doing some of the internal reporting, right? We talked about the sexual abuse. Like, they wrote a report, but again, they're limited because they have no authority over the churches. We don't report to them, but they can voluntarily ask, right? And they can do what they can. And then the executive committee, you got to have somebody to run this. They're the ones setting up the convention meeting every year. There's a little overhead with that. And if you actually go out to the Southern Baptist website, you can actually get a detailed report, kind of like ours, and it shows you exactly, dollar amounts and stuff to every specific organization. Now, you'll notice here, we have, from here, there's a special offering. That's the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. That goes 100% into international missions. And in fact, you'll see a flyer that we've got around. This is the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. And this tells you, what does it do? Well, there's 8 different missionaries, right, to pray for, and it tells you, let's see, Virginia, Nevada, Massachusetts, Colorado, Florida, Pennsylvania, right? So this seems like North American missions. So that's not on this quote, but, imagine this. Yeah, so imagine this, but going to NAM, NAMB, North American Mission Board. And there's whatever we collect, we send it into the state, and then they send it straight on. There's no overhead associated with this. 100% of your dollar goes there. So that's how we cooperate through the Southern Baptist Convention. And this historically has been probably the most defining characteristic of Southern Baptists, because since we're all so relatively small, right? Think of the Catholic Church. There's many parishes around, but they all automatically are part of the bigger church, right? They all report and authority, and the money flows up to the bigger church. We don't have that. So without cooperation, we would be very limited in our impact. And so early on in Southern Baptist history, even before the Southern Baptist Convention was formed, back in the probably right after the country was founded, the Triennial Convention, before the Northern Baptist and Southern Baptist split, cooperation was a big deal, right? This type of structure was being set up even then. And so it just so happens the Southern Baptists have grown, right? And now the Southern Baptists are one of the largest, they'll call it denomination because that's the closest thing that most people know, but technically we're a convention. And we're the largest denomination in the country right now in the United States. So that's how we cooperate, and that's where your money goes, and we are free to cooperate in other ways as we see fit, and we should. What was it? I guess it was a few years ago. I hope they're okay.
It was probably Brenda's cane.
A few years ago, we got a truckload together to send relief supplies down for a hurricane that struck in Florida, right? You remember that? Mm-hmm. And we cooperated with several churches. We reached out, we cooperated, right? That was a benevolence mission, and we're free to cooperate with that. Not to say that we perfectly agreed with every church that they came by and gave us stuff. That's okay, right? Our differences are okay. But we decided, hey, we're going to focus on this one issue, and we're going to cooperate on this issue, and we're going to further God's kingdom through that. Same reason, you'll see some cooperation with very different denominations. Al Mohler, the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, famously gave a speech at Brigham Young University. And if you're not familiar with that, that's a Mormon college. Now, what was the cooperation there? Obviously, we have very different viewpoints, but he was there to cooperate about religious liberty. And he famously gave a line that says, I don't think we're going to the same heaven, but I think we very well possibly could be going to the same jail. And that's what he was there to talk about, was religious liberty and the laws being enacted, therefore, and how to, things that both sides could do to help that common cause. Things like that, where it's not commonly thought of. Protestants and Catholics cooperating, for example, against abortion. That is a shared cause that both sides have an interest in and want to see rectified, even though we're issues, doctrinal issues. Does anybody have any questions about cooperation or what that means? Okay. I think it's very clear overall. I think this particular passage right here is one of the clearest outside of what I would call the core doctrines, God, all stuff. This is, if you're a Southern Baptist church and you're not giving into the cooperative program, I think it's very hard for you to call yourself a Southern Baptist, right? That is one of the defining characteristic, is we all give into the greater mission than ourselves. So, but you don't have to be. There's plenty of independent Baptist churches that operate outside of this. And so if they want to send a missionary, basically what they have to do is they have to say, hey, missionary, we'd love to send you. We can't fully afford it, but we'll partner with you and fund a portion of it. And so typically the missionaries have to raise their own support, and they typically have the support of 10 or more churches. They have to raise their own support for training and all that. And there's Southern Baptists have generally said there's a lot of inefficiencies with that. And you've got missionaries that are, what if a church goes under? What if a church doesn't send a check one month? Right? With a bigger organization, you don't have to worry about that stuff. And what if you need something bigger than yourself? Right? Say we've got what is it? Is it Haiti or the Dominican Republic going through basically a coup right now? Haiti. Right? There's missionaries down there. What if they had to get out real fast? Well, if you're independent, then you're independent. You have to negotiate your own travel out. Whereas if you're with the Southern Baptists, we have access to jets and stuff. Like, we can fly you out. And we can fly you all out. So, again, pros and cons.
Is something that I really have a problem with the Southern Baptists. I think they do a horrible job at showing us as supporters what is going on with those actual missionaries. Because I've been independent Baptist a lot of my life, and we knew what missionaries we had. We knew what they were doing. We knew what their needs were. We knew all these things. And with Southern Baptists, you don't know who these missionaries are. You don't know where they are. You don't know what they
have
need.
a good WU going on. You would.
Well, but still, I mean, there are
saying,
so
the
many
information
of them.
is there.
Yeah.
You may not have it personally, but if we had a really good organized WMU, we would know.
Well, I don't think you should have to have another committee or organization to find this information. This should be posted. And I think that's something the Southern Baptist does wrong.
Pros and cons, right? Centralized organization. I'm sure it's there somewhere, right? Like you said, WMU can get access to it, but the average person, whereas the independent Baptist churches I've been a part of, the missionaries that you're supporting because you're writing a check to them every month. And usually there's like a newsletter, or you see their faces, or they actually come and visit when they come, right? Pros and cons, right? Pros and cons. You are more connected to that missionary when you're supporting them directly. At the same time, right? They've got to split their attention between 10, 20 different churches to get the support they need to do what they need to do.
Well, in the churches I've been in, and they weren't all Baptist churches either, but we would take, I worked with the teenage group, So I had like 13 to 21 is where we cut it off at. And we would go to, I'm in so many different countries, I don't even remember where all we've been.
Mhm.
And we would go for 2 to 3 weeks, whatever they needed. I mean, kids learn how to, work with concrete, help build. I mean, and of course we would go, with message and, usually have not like a vacation Bible school, but we would have that at the end of the day, and we would have singing at night and things like that. And it's like, I don't even think I know anybody who does that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
And they still do. They still do. It's just,
you don't hear
society's
about it
changed a
as
little
much.
bit. And the thing with the Southern Baptist way of doing things is you almost have this rise of professional missionaries, right? They're trained on this. This is what they do. Like, we'll kind of leave it. You kind of develop this, well, let the professionals do it.
Yeah.
And, we'll support them. That's great to a point.
It is,
Right?
but that point,
But-
when you see these kids working
Yeah.
with kids who have nothing
Yeah.
and crying their hearts out and going back to church and saying, we want to work a coffee station, we want to do a lemonade, we want to do,
Yeah.
let's bake cakes and this, man, they were sending money. We sent money several different places.
Yeah.
Or needs,
Yeah.
things like that.
Mm-hmm. And
I miss
the
that.
thing is, to be clear, nothing about this order says that this church can't do something like that. We're locally autonomous. We can do kind of whatever we want to, as long as it's biblical. Now, I found it. I'm going to show this. I found this last night, and I thought it was hilarious because this is a meme, by the way, and y'all gonna like this. Let's check in on the Protestant Reformation, and you get the helicopter dropping the Easter eggs, right? You kind of get this grand overkill of ideas. But I thought this was funny because, I've seen this. We actually have a large church in the area, Crossroads, that does this. And, I don't think you're going to see this with other denominations because we're locally autonomous. And if you can get together a helicopter and drop Easter eggs and you think that that's promoting the mission of the church because, you're going to give them the gospel while they're there, you can do that, right? And anyway, I thought that was funny. I saw that. And so, we've had internal discussions ourselves about, this basketball ministry that we're about to do. Is that promoting the ministry? And, people have different opinions. And some churches would say no. We're going to do a traditional vacation Bible school, and we're going to do that. Fine. That's totally fine. Because locally autonomous. And so it really puts the onus back on the membership of the church to keep the church in the right spot, right? Because it's basically Jesus, the local pastor, and that church. That's the authority structure. So, now luckily I don't think we have that problem here, but if Kenny does go off the rails, it's up to us, right, to fix that issue. So, and same thing with deacons and all that fun stuff. Same thing with members. So, all right. Anything else before the next section? And again, when we're in these latter sections, we're really talking about emphasis. You're not going to find another church denomination that says, oh yeah, we're not going to cooperate. Every church is going to say, yeah, cooperation is good. But Southern Baptists put a lot of emphasis on cooperation. So, moving forward, the Christian and the social order. Oh yeah. So this is where things start to get fun, because these last three, social order, peace and war, religious liberty, the family, these are really kind of coming into play in the latter parts, right? As a Southern Baptist, right, they were founded in 18-something. These last few sections are, let's say, responses to society's change as a whole, especially, let's say, after 1960, okay? So keep that in mind, but I think we'll find that there's still some good stuff in here. The Christian and Social Order says, all Christians are under obligation to seek to make the will of Christ supreme in our own lives and in human society. Means and method used for the improvement of society and the establishment of righteousness among men can be truly and permanently helpful only when they are rooted in the regeneration of the individual by the saving grace of God in Jesus Christ. In the spirit of Christ, Christians should oppose racism, every form of greed, selfishness, and vice, all forms of sexual immorality, including adultery, homosexuality, and pornography. We should work to provide for the orphaned, the needy, the abused, the aged, the helpless, and the sick. We should speak on behalf of the unborn and contend for the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural death. Every Christian should bring industry, government, and society as a whole under the sway of the principles of righteousness, truth, and brotherly love. In order to promote these ends, Christians should be ready to work with all men of goodwill in any good cause, always being careful to act in the spirit of love without compromising their loyalty to Christ and His truth. Now, you may disagree with one or more of these statements. This is where I think the looseness of the Southern Baptist Convention really plays into effect. Because we talked about earlier in this study Saddleback and their basically disfellowship from the cooperation on their view of female pastors. Now, can we, now that you know we went through cooperation, if we partnered with a church that had female pastors on a subject, let's say collecting food for the Canathon every year, would we be in our right to do that as a church?
Yes. Because
Yes.
we're autonomous.
Yes, we're autonomous. Okay. Would you support that? If the pastor said, hey, we want to partner with X church, and they have a female pastor, to collect food for the needy, would you vote yes or no to that?
I vote yes.
Yes. It's a biblical thing.
Is there a no in here? I'm trying to collect. I don't know. Maybe a shrug. Okay. This is where the looseness comes in. Because different churches will value their doctrine differently. And they'll say, that doctrine is too different for us to support in good conscience. Some will say, we disagree, but we can totally support this cause because we are called to help the needy.
Because the ministry is happening.
Because of the ministry, not because you necessarily support it. Okay? So, where this comes into effect is in this, it says we're under obligation. That's an ought. That's an ought statement, right? We're trying to make the will of Christ supreme in our own lives. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Some people would have a problem, and in human society, because they'll go into debates about the separation of church and state, right? I've seen that happen. Some people disagree on that part. Some people disagree about permanently helpful only when rooted in the regeneration of the individual. We talked about last week, some denominations seem to be functioning under the idea that if we improve society, people are more apt to come to Christ. So we improve society first, and then we can witness to people. Whereas Southern Baptists seem to be the reverse. We witness to people, and their regeneration improves society. That's two different ways of doing it. That sentence right there is very, I think, a Southern Baptist distinctive, or a Baptist distinctive at least. But some people would disagree with that. And they would say something like, well, it's hard to be saved when you're starving. Maybe there's a point there. Let's see. In the spirit of Christ, Christians should oppose racism, every form of greed, selfishness, and vice, and all forms of sexual immorality. They may say, especially a timely topic, homosexuality isn't sexual immorality. Disagree with that statement. What is greed? Right? Whatever that means. The fact that you live in the United States means you're in the top 10% of the world, at least. Are you greedy? Do you feel greedy? Right. Oppose racism. Right. It's hard to get away from the history of the Southern Baptist Convention. Southern Baptist Convention was founded on the separation on the point of slavery. Northern Baptists opposed it. Southern Baptists wanted to keep it. It was integrated in society. In fact, coming back into cooperation, right, you can imagine this tension building over years, but kind of the hay that broke the camel's back was this idea of cooperation. The proposal was a missionary wanted to take a Southern Baptist missionary wanted to take their slave with them on their mission. And Northern Baptists said, no, missionaries have to go on their own. They're not allowed, basically, help. Like, you can't take your paid help. But the Southern Baptists took that as, well, they're against us. And that kind of, like, really started the divide there. And it was about cooperation, of all things. Kind of weird, but there's a history there. We've moved past that, I think, as a denomination. We do oppose racism. Again, you got to define that. What is, like all these terms, society has flipped so much. You would think they'd be clear cut. What's adultery? If you're not aware, there's been a huge rise in open relationships. Is 3 consenting individuals adultery?
Is that coming back? It used to be back in the 60s and 70s.
I have, according to my research, yes, it is coming back, but maybe it's also just now more visible.
That could be.
Right? I don't know. Pornography, those standards have changed. You can probably remember a day when, like, the bikini was, like, super taboo.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're lucky to get a bikini if you go out onto the beach. I think some of these are fairly straightforward. We should work to provide for the orphaned, the needy, the abused, the aged, the helpless, and the sick. I don't see any disagreement with that. Again, what is sick, right? Again, you're locally autonomous. We have to decide what this means on an individual basis. We'll talk about what this local church does here in a second. We should speak on the behalf of the unborn. This part right here wasn't even in there before the abortion stuff started, right? Because it wasn't even a thing, right? So now it is. And Southern Baptists say we speak on the behalf of the unborn. We speak on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves, right? They are people, they have rights. And we contend for the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural death. Now, notice if you're thinking about sexual causes, Catholics historically have been against birth control. Southern Baptists, if you read this, we don't make a point one way or the other. All we're saying is once conceived, that person has a right to live. And conception to natural death. What does natural death mean? We're working in a society now where we have assisted suicide. That's a big debate now. Is assisted suicide something that we support? Especially if it's somebody who is cognizant enough to make that decision for their own. And I've had the unfortunate reality of dealing with people that are very, very, very sick. And, if you haven't experienced it, there are some really bad cases where I could see why somebody may want to end it in a more dignified way. But that's a big, big debate. Every Christian should bring to industry, government, and society as a whole under the sway of principles of righteousness, truth, and brotherly love. This is that whole Southern Baptists as a whole are called evangelical for a reason. You talk to other people of other denominations, you go to work, they don't talk about their faith, right? It's a divisive topic. We're not going to talk about it. My faith is private to me, right? Southern Baptists historically don't think like that. We're very vocal about our faith. We're very vocal about people coming to faith, coming to church, and dealing with your issues. Southern Baptists pray in public. We pray at work. We are very open with our faith in any circumstance. Now, obviously, every individual differs, but what I'm talking about as a whole, as Southern Baptists, if you go, ask around. If you go into your workplace or public place and you see somebody praying or talking about their faith, ask them, what church do you go to? 9 times out of 10, it'd be Southern Baptist Church. So, and then we seek to bring industry, government, and society as a whole. Now, this bothers some people, right? Because people obviously have the free will to choose not to. But at the same time, I think this is almost a given, because if you're a Christian, think about if you're a Christian business owner, per se. And, let's take Daryl here, because he's easy target right here. Right? How can your faith not play into your business? Like, for example, Daryl knows, if the Holy Spirit is in Daryl, and he gives a quote for a job that he knows is robbery, that's going to speak on him, right? Or it's going to speak on you, right? If he knows that he's giving something that's unfair, or he's billing for work that you haven't done, right? That's a problem, right? So part of this is, it just comes naturally with being a Christian. Your moral values follow you wherever you go. You should not be stealing from the till, right? You should be putting in, if you clock in for 8 hours, you should do 8 hours of work, right? Again, details can, and what that means, but obviously we want those principles of righteousness, because we want to treat others as, we want to be treated as we treat others, right? The golden rule. So we obviously want to be treated with respect. We don't want to be cheated, so we don't cheat others, right? All these things. Truth and brotherly love. Now, if you've had a brother, you know that love can sometimes be a little more aggressive than what you may think, and sometimes that does come through. But we should always realize that we love one another even when we disagree on topics, especially with our brothers in Christ. And they can have wildly different topics, or wildly different viewpoints on topics. And in order to promote these ends, Christians should be ready to work with all men, not just Christians, all men in any good cause, always being careful to act in the spirit of love without compromising their loyalty to Christ and His truth. And now you can see that these are tied together, like cooperation and this tied together. Cooperation is more of cooperation within the church, the family, so to speak. This is cooperation with everybody. If there is an organization out there that's not religious based, but still is cooperating to a point that we want as a religious organization to support, or they're working to oppose something we want to oppose. Not only can we should, right? And so, I don't know what that would look like. I don't have an example off the top of my head, but you can think of maybe secular organizations against abortion, right? Nothing wrong with partnering together for that topic. Even though we may disagree on everything else, like that topic, we can focus on and be in good conscience of doing things. Does that make sense? So, overall, these two, I think they probably split them up just because it'd be a super long paragraph, right? These to me are combined. These are two things of the same kind. We cooperate where there is unification, as long as we're not compromising, Christ, our loyalty to Him, or our conscience. We're pretty much free to cooperate on any cause that we want, right? Whatever, and that's the benefit of Southern Baptists is we have so much flexibility, right? The benefit of the organization, we're locally autonomous. If we decide as a church to do it, and another church decides not to, that's okay. They can't get on us. We can't get on them. Whereas Catholics, right, or another, I keep saying Catholic because like they're the most probably well-defined organization, but other Presbyterians, Lutherans to a point, like if you want to support something, the whole church has to support it, right? And you'll get your hand slapped if you start to go outside the rails. Southern Baptists, we're locally autonomous. And we can go above our deacon boards. There's only, 7 or 8? We take a vote, done. Ready to go, right? Basketball camp. We want to do that. Is that a good idea? Yeah. Done. Let's go for it, right? Maybe it doesn't work out. But, they decided, and we're going to do it. That's cool, right? That gives us a lot of flexibility. And I think that's probably what's promoted the growth of the Southern Baptist Convention over the years. Now, of course, all denominations nowadays are falling. Southern Baptists are falling less than other denominations. But huge explosive growth from the 40s, definitely through the 90s, into the Southern Baptists reached their peak membership count in 2016 at like 43 million people or something. So now you kind of see we're part of a bigger whole. Isn't that cool? So that's all I got. Any questions? Any thoughts? All right. Thank you all for coming. We'll pray. We'll shut off the stream, and then I've got some announcements. So, Father, thank you for this opportunity for us to come here and study your word through the Baptist Faith and Message. We thank you for all the blessings that the cooperative program has given and that we're a part of, and we just pray that it'll keep being a light unto the world, sending these missionaries and information out into the world to support your kingdom. We pray now that you'll open our hearts into the message. We thank you for your Son, and especially this day, this Resurrection Day, and all the defeat of death and what it means for us.